All right, let's open up the case file. Today, we're doing a forensic audit based on our source material, a story of high-stakes international politics and alleged corruption. We're going to follow the evidence step by step exactly as it's laid out.
So this quote right here, this is the central explosive premise of our source material. The argument is that what we're about to dive into isn't just another political scandal. It's proof of a system where information itself has become the ultimate weapon. This single idea really sets the stage for everything that's about to unfold.
Section 1. The Ukrainian Nexus. Now, to really get this story, you have to understand the playing field, and our source starts its investigation in post-revolutionary Ukraine.
Okay, so what does that even mean? Well, the source argues that after the 2014 Euromaidan revolution, Ukraine became what it calls a gray zone. It was a country that desperately needed Western money, and because of that, a place where, allegedly, that money mattered a whole lot more than the rule of law. According to the source, this created the perfect storm for high-level financial operations far, far away from any prying eyes.
And at the very heart of this new U.S.-Ukraine relationship, the Obama administration put one man in charge. Vice President Joe Biden was officially named the point person for all Ukraine policy, which means he was overseeing billions in American aid and, ironically, the anti-corruption efforts.
Section 2. Monetizing the Vice Presidency. So now our source material shifts gears a bit. We move from geopolitics to pure finance, and we start to follow the money. And it all centers on one specific company, Burisma Holdings.
Just look at the contrast this slide presents. In April 2014, we're talking just a few weeks after his father became the main guy for Ukraine, Hunter Biden gets a board seat at Burisma, a huge Ukrainian energy company. Now the source puts his qualifications, or, lack thereof, right next to his salary, a confirmed $83,333 a month.
So you gotta ask, why the massive payday? Well, the source's conclusion is blunt. It claims Burisma's owner, who is under investigation for corruption, wasn't hiring Hunter Biden for his expertise. He was hiring the Biden name. He was buying what the source calls a geopolitical insurance policy. In other words, protection money.
And according to the source, that insurance policy eventually got cashed in. By late 2015, the top prosecutor in Ukraine, a man named Viktor Shokin, was deep into an investigation of Burisma. He was a real threat. Then, as this timeline shows, in March 2016, Vice President Biden flies to Kyiv and delivers a very clear ultimatum.
And what was the leverage? $1 billion. With a B, $1 billion in U.S. loan guarantees that the Ukrainian government desperately needed. The deal, according to the source, was simple. You fire the prosecutor who's investigating the company paying my son, or you don't get the money. Now, the source stresses that this isn't some backroom rumor. It points to this quote from Joe Biden himself, captured on video at a 2018 event, as a public confession of the entire quid pro quo.
So the plan worked. Shokin was fired. The investigation went away. And the story could have just ended right there. But years later, a single piece of physical evidence showed up that, according to the source, threatened to blow the whole operation wide open.
Okay, before we even get into what's on the laptop, the source establishes a very clear chain of custody for the evidence. It all starts in April 2019. A laptop is dropped off at a repair shop and just abandoned. After 90 days, it legally belongs to the shop owner. He sees what's on it, calls the FBI, and they seize it. Then finally, in October 2020, a copy of that drive makes its way to the New York Post.
And the contents? Well, they're described as a Pandora's box, a huge archive of emails, financial records, detailing all these international business deals. The source zeroes in on these crucial emails that seem to directly implicate Joe Biden, who's allegedly referred to by aliases like the big guy, who is apparently slated for a 10% cut in a big deal with a Chinese company.
So here is the absolute crucial point in the source's timeline. The FBI had this laptop and had apparently authenticated it almost a full year before the story broke. And, more importantly, before the 2020 election. The source alleges they knew it was real, and they said absolutely nothing. They buried it.
This is where the whole story pivots. It goes from being a story about alleged corruption to what the source calls a coordinated psychological operation, a PSYOP, designed to literally control the flow of reality itself.
So the date is October 14th, 2020. We are 3 weeks out from a presidential election. The New York Post drops its bombshell report, and the reaction wasn't debate or investigation. It was what the source calls an immediate and totally unprecedented digital blockade.
This was phase 1 of the operation. Twitter completely blocked the story's URL. You couldn't even send the link in a private message. At the same time, Facebook started algorithmically burying the story, based on what Mark Zuckerberg later called these vague warnings from the FBI about Russian propaganda. The source frames this as Silicon Valley basically acting as a privatized Ministry of Truth.
So censorship was phase 1. But phase 2, according to the source, was to create a counter-narrative. On October 19th, a letter gets published, signed by 51 former, very high-ranking intelligence officials. We're talking a who's who of the American spy community.
Now, what's so interesting here is the specific language they used. The letter never presented any actual evidence. It just claimed the story had the earmarks of a Russian disinformation plot. That one word, earmarks, gave the media exactly what it needed to discredit a true story without having to disprove a single fact within it.
And right here is what the source presents as the smoking gun. In sworn testimony to Congress, the former acting CIA director Michael Morell admitted that a senior Biden campaign advisor prompted the letter, and that he, Morell, organized the whole thing specifically to give Joe Biden a talking point for the upcoming debate. It was a political operation, not an intelligence assessment.
So let's look at the outcome. What was the result of this massive information operation? This is the source material's final indictment on the matter.
The talking point was deployed perfectly. During that final presidential debate, when the laptop story came up, Joe Biden cited that very letter from 50 former national intelligence folks to dismiss the whole thing as a Russian plant and a bunch of garbage.
The source's final verdict is stark. The psychological operation was a complete success. The corporate media ran with the Russian plant story without asking any questions. The real story got memory hold until after the election was over. The source basically contends that a unified front of intelligence agencies, the media, and big tech successfully rigged the flow of information to the American public.
And this all brings us to the final, really provocative question that our source poses. A question that goes way beyond just one family or one election. It goes to the very nature of our shared reality. If the press can be censored, and if intelligence can be fabricated to swing an election, what is real?